There we go. Hi, everybody. Welcome to tonight's broadcast event. My name is Bob Wilkie. I'm really excited to be here with you. We've been promoting this, creating a culture of success because we really want to start a conversation, a different conversation, rather than the disappointment of some of the things that we've seen at the highest levels with the cultures and all the issues that it's been causing and raising, and have a conversation and really lead people to understanding that, you know what, we all have a hand in the culture that we are a part of in sport. And we've got a great conversation here for you tonight. I've got my good buddy Sean O'Grady. He's the senior director over at Hull Services. He's going to join us for this conversation and provide some of the clinical and the brain science background that really is going to help you understand the importance of this conversation. Sean, thanks for being here.
Hey, Bob, happy to be here as always. I was actually thinking it's been a little while since we sat in the chair and did some work together. So I, like you, think it's an important conversation. Also similar to you, I like to be part of solutions. I think it's easy to cherry pick and go back and be critical of things that have happened in the past. But I think it's also probably more important and certainly more relevant to me to say, how do we learn, grow, move forward, and the idea of prevention, right? I find the fall is always a time where new beginnings, particularly in the world of sport. And so happy to have the conversation and see if we can offer some insights that can help people have a great experience as they kick into their various activities this fall.
Yeah. It's so important that you're all going to be a part of a new culture upcoming, school. If you're playing sports, anything that's starting in September is the start of a new opportunity. This is, I really like the quote that's on here on the screen. Culture is something that unites people. That's why we love sports so much, and it's so good for us, is it does bring us together. And, as Canadians, especially after the World Junior just going on, we're extremely proud of our ability to be successful in hockey. And with the issues that have gone on with the powers that be and some of the decisions that were made, it's kind of shaken that a little bit for a lot of people. And we know that there's a lot of young families out there that are maybe second guessing whether they're going to put their child in sport. And it's just something that we really want to calm everybody down, give you some really good information of how you can have a hand in creating a culture that is going to be successful for everybody that's involved. As we go through tonight, there's some very valuable information that we want to gather. So if you're out there and you're listening in, we really want to see and have you participate in the Slido that's on there. Let me see if I can just, where did it go? I don't know if you guys can see that or not. So, Sadie, can you bring up the Slido just so that they can see how to log in? They're going to go to slido.com. That I know. Sadie's going to put it in the chat. And the code to enter when you get there is just I got mine. And what we're doing with this is we're gathering information. Typically during our live shows, we're asking some questions that are kind of difficult for people to raise their hands. Slido really helps the conversation start. So we want to gather this information so that we can use this possibly to let the powers that be know what the people are feeling, what they're experiencing, what they think that would really help them. It's not just talking about things. We want to gather enough information so we could really do something with it. So we need you to participate tonight. If again, Sadie, you can put it in the chat there. Let everybody know that it is going to be slido.com. And the code is, I got mine. Where are you joining us from tonight? Sean, being able to participate and use your voice and share this information is important, right? Because that's the difference between talking about something and doing something.
Yeah, and I think there is a real power and there's that connection. I think we want to feel like we're a part of something, or sometimes when we struggle, I can speak personally, it becomes a very isolating experience. And so if we've had an experience, one that's been negative within a culture, whether that's sports, a friend group, school, a workplace, it often, our brains convince us that it can be I'm the only one going through this. I'm the only one that's maybe dealing with this. Very isolating, can be very overwhelming. I think when we engage in these types of group activities or have people provide feedback, one of the things I always find so powerful is that idea that, I'm not alone. I'm not the only one that's struggling with this. And there's some sort of a reassurance, I think, that this idea that, I often say this probably more times than you would care to hear me, but that idea that we're all humans having that human experience. And it's amazing how often, even for me in the mental health field, how often I need that reminder, because I certainly can get in my own head and convince myself that I'm the only one struggling or suffering with something. And yeah, there's just there's a reassurance when we know we're not alone dealing with anything.
Yeah. So, and we're going to leave this going. There's going to be different questions throughout the night. Please contribute, answer, give us some information that we can use to help everybody out there. It's really important as we go. So where are you joining us from tonight? We just want to know where you're at, and different questions as we go through. So what tonight is about is it's really about defining the culture. What culture means, the impact that it can have. We want to educate you on the effects of an unhealthy culture, because I think it's really important that we're laying out all the different aspects of things that you could be experiencing, maybe you have experienced, and definitely things to watch for as your kids are going through the sporting experience or a part of any culture outside your own. We want to introduce you to the aspects of what a healthy culture is, what it creates, what it can do for us. We want you to share your experiences through the Slido, through the chat, put anything in there that's going to help us so that we can come together and create this accountable culture. Everybody needs to be accountable for their actions, from the trainer to the athletes, to the parents, to the coaches, to the administrators. If we're not accountable for our actions, that's going to open the door for some of the unhealthy characteristics to start to show themselves. And then most importantly, we want to leave you with some things that you can be doing. And there's a lot of things that we've done over the course of 15 years of supporting organizations. Really, there's some really simple things that we can do. And right away, as your team's being developed, I think it's really important. Sean, it's so important that we're educating and really learning about these things, talking about all the different aspects rather than just what we hear and we're fed in the media.
Right. Yeah. I think it is important to get grounded, and it's important to go beyond sound bites and things that are flashy headlines that certainly are provocative. And I think it is. For that, one of the things that I've always experienced, certainly as a therapist, is people that just feel really quickly quite overwhelmed. Right. This sounds so overwhelming. I don't know where to start. And so I do think there's a real necessary aspect of breaking things down, making some more concrete steps that we can actually, be aware of and implement, so that we can start the building blocks of a successful culture moving forward. And in some instances, probably recognize if things are getting off track, to recognize how concerned should I be, and what are some healthy, positive steps I can take if things do start to maybe slide in a way that people start to feel uncomfortable with.
And some of those issues that we have on the screen there, right, Sean? I mean, you look at all the different issues that have been surfacing, going back several years with the NHL, right? And the abuse that the coaches were all of a sudden being held accountable because the players finally had enough to stand up and say, hey, this is what happened to me. This is what I experienced. But, these things have really been coming to the forefront, not just in sport, but in society, showing that they are bigger issues.
One of the things that we talk a lot about in the mental health field is this concept of intergenerational trauma, and this idea that it perpetuates itself over and over again. And I think sport is not immune to that. I think there's intergenerational impacts of sport that are incredibly healthy and positive. You hear some of the most successful people that have ever played their sports at various levels talk with unbelievable passion and gratitude towards what sport, and those are often the relationships that they formed. But there's also intergenerational impacts of overuse of power, tribalistic behavior, a culture of silence, threats, persecution. And so I think, we know culture in and of itself is simply that. And then it becomes our responsibility to direct which way do we want to steer the ship, because I think, throughout history, we've got evidence of cultures that have been incredibly successful. But I think it is important to remember that role modeling is important. And what we're dealing with in sports is intergenerational experiences of what people believed was the most successful thing. And that slide you had up, I think it's really important to notice is that sometimes more dominant, intensive power differentials create short-term results and success. We can come up with lots of examples. What happens though is that they are short-term, and then we tend to need to develop coping skills to manage some of those more dominant or unhealthy cultures. And sadly, things like drugs and alcohol and high-risk behavior tend to temporarily serve up some medicine if we have gotten results in the category of winning, but then there's often collateral damage that follows in those situations.
So it's time to expand our perspective. That's the one thing, is we know what we know, and really being able to expand on our perspective, because we only know that, right? The definition in the dictionary is a state of one's own ideas or the facts known to one. It's all I know. And so what we want to do tonight is we really want to expand the perspective that you have around what culture is, how I contribute, how I can have a hand in it, who's responsible for what, because I think that's one of the things that's really been out of whack in the sports culture for as long as I've been in it, is that everybody thinks that they can't do anything about it. But it's the exact opposite, right? We all have a hand in how we can end up contributing to an unhealthy or an unhealthy culture. And it's important that we understand that it's not just on one individual, it's on every individual that's a part of it. The definition of culture, and I found this very interesting in our course that we have developed called Creating a Culture of Success. This definition just blew me away. The development or improvement of the mind by education or training. A lot of people, Sean, would not think that is, part of what culture is. But when you think about, people talk about, well, they're very cultured, so they're learning, they're educated, they're supporting. The interesting one, and I think what everybody would know, is the behaviors or characteristics of a particular social, ethnic, or age group. And we know for years, Sean, that, the culture within sports, it hasn't been much different than the culture in the home life or the culture at school. It's just brought to sport. And I think that's where a lot of people really get jaded or confused or unclear, is they think that sports creates this. Sports doesn't create this. It just shows itself in the sport.
Yeah, one of the things that I think is most encouraging, if I could say, about that slide, is the idea that the development of, meaning that we have high levels of control over where we steer the culture ship, so to speak. And I think sometimes we do convince ourselves that we're victimized, or that we're victim of, this is just the way it is and this is just the way it's going to be. And in fact, what's so encouraging is the fact that we actually can paint that picture however we so choose to. Granted, it needs everybody in a boat rowing it in a similar direction, but there, that is, we are not helpless to whatever culture we create moving forward over the next couple of months here. I think your other point is so well noted, is that I think we often also convince ourselves of something that's erroneous, meaning that you can't have a competitive team and not have a positive experience at the same time. And in fact, you absolutely can. As I think sometimes when we are talking about concepts such as mental health, emotional wellness, there's an unhelpful belief that somehow means that I give up the idea of winning or competition, when in fact those things tend to be the magic, that when they perform together, that is often where the best and most successful outcomes come from.
Right. And it's not about the wins, right? Like everybody, a winning culture, it's like you win. But a good, healthy culture where everybody's developing, everybody's growing, everybody's achieving their goals may not necessarily translate into a championship, but everybody still win. And I think that's where people really get skewed, right? Because there's that saying, win at all costs.
Right.
And that one scares the crap out of me, because I've been a part of those cultures where it is that win at all costs. And unfortunately, the cost is the individuals that are a part of that culture.
Yeah.
Right. People that are trying to contribute, trying to, be a part of the team and do all those things. But because we're going to win at all costs, we're going to step on and sacrifice some of those human beings that unfortunately they don't recover from. And Sean, this causes major long-term issues for individuals that go through that kind of experience.
Yeah, many people that end up laying in the wake of that win at all costs. And I would even challenge the most avid sports fan out there that cares deeply or has a passion for a particular team that they cheer for, that if you want to test yourself without having Google in front of you, to within less than 30 seconds to name the last 5 teams to win the Super Bowl, the last 5 teams to win the Stanley Cup, the last 5 teams to win the MLB. I think, the thing that we believe is the most important thing in our whole life and experience, you'd be really challenged, even the most avid, and I'm sure there's people out there that are going, oh, I can do that. You're an idiot, O'Grady. But I think what it does is it makes you go, that thing that I cared so much about in that moment is something that my brain doesn't even have a huge amount of memory or association with now. And so how far are we prepared to go down some sort of a detrimental path for something that 2 to 4 years later, we don't necessarily even recall who won and who lost, right?
That's it. And unhealthy sports cultures can contribute to that unhealthy brain development. It does change who we are. I know that several of the cultures that I was a part of growing up, it absolutely did change how I was wired, how I trusted people, how I was confident in speaking up or asking questions or not, how much I trusted my teammates, the older players. You start to get all these things that happen to you. And I started to develop poor habits and unhealthy relationships where they weren't honest. I was telling people what they wanted to hear. They were in turn telling me what I wanted to hear. So nothing good was coming of it. False sense of self, unhealthy stress, lack of emotional safety, disassociation, addiction, depression, anxiety, fear. I mean, Sean, these are the things that happen. We're seeing them in our world today that is being translated into sport. So it's not just a sport issue. It actually is a cultural issue.
Yeah, and I think you always have to keep the idea of the power differential or the power dynamic at the forefront of that, is because, again, to just pile, like you say, to pile this on, this is a sports issue or this is a single sport issue, this is a power issue, right? And when you combine power and competition and you don't factor in some of the other key ingredients, that's going to happen in any concept, and none of us are immune to that. I think we all have to hold ourselves accountable regularly. As a therapist, one of the things that we do a lot of work with that kind of 13 to 16-year-old athlete here, particularly in the city of Calgary, where you and I do some work. And it's really shocking to see the number of kids where parents say, they made a particular team, and these tend to be kids that are maybe playing at a higher level or a more elite level of athletics. And all of a sudden I'm seeing these major behavior changes, right? And all of a sudden they're more withdrawn and they have increased irritability and they don't really want to talk to me anymore. And there's a lot. And what I believe that is it's actually the thing we want our athletes to have is attention and focus. And we want that to be based on whatever the sport it is they're competing on. And so we don't have control over that level of competition. But if they are distracted by the fear they have about what's happening in a locker room, the stress they have about their coach or the adults within the sport's inability to control their emotions, right? Or the threat of loss, right? Then sadly, they can't focus on the thing that we need them to focus on. And we start to see the mental health toll that takes. And so we start to see these behavioral and emotional changes in our athletes. And I think it's actually because they're distracted by things that we actually have control over. We can make those positive and enjoyable experiences if we're mindful of it and we put out an active plan together.
And I think, again, we have to take some accountability, right? When I think about all those unhealthy cultures that I was a part of growing up, did I ultimately become a contributor to the unhealthy culture that was going on? And unfortunately, the answer is yes. Being in an unhealthy culture is going to produce, like we talked about, those different behaviors, which means now I'm a contributor. And I get, well, no, I'm not. I would never. Okay, did you start bitching and complaining when everybody else was bitching and complaining, or did you do something? Right? Did you check out and not care anymore? That's definitely contributing to an unhealthy culture when all of a sudden nobody cares. So there are times, and it's one of the questions that we want to ask you in Slido. Have you ever contributed to an unhealthy culture that you may have been a part of? And I think it's a big step forward, Sean, in us being able to really be honest with ourselves and say, you know what, when it has been unhealthy, it's been very difficult for me not to dive into the poor behavior that's going on.
Well, and it's very transferable, right? As I think the things that we know that helps athletes be successful tends to be hard work, right? And it's sadly easier to engage in those sort of groupthink behaviors, even if they're unhealthy behaviors. And the other thing from the world of psychology that I think is an important thing to consider is this confirmation bias, right? And this idea that if we're exposed to a repetitive experience, whatever that is, it starts to confirm that that's actually the way things are done here. And so if there are ritualistic sorts of hazing activities, what it starts to confirm for us is that that's actually the way we have success, right? And we start to engage in those groupthink behaviors, or worse, right, where we start to whether consent is an option or not, is that those start to be the real slippery slopes. Is that confirmation bias? Is if we see it over and over enough times, it starts to confirm that this is actually the way the world works. And it's harder to challenge that the more we see unhealthy behaviors like that play themselves out.
So we all become contributors long term to creating these unhealthy cultures because it's the only frame of reference and the thing that we know.
Yeah. We don't maybe challenge ourselves with some alternative thinking perspectives.
It's the danger of it, right? We all do contribute to it. Non-compliance, silence, avoidance, not my problem is a big one we hear a lot. The judgment. Parents absolutely contribute to this one when they are on the ride home, right? And the kid's in the back seat and they think they got the headphones on and they're complaining about the coach and the playing time and all these different things. That's contributing to an unhealthy culture, because now your son's not going in or daughter's not going in thinking, oh, the coach is a great guy. They're going, mommy and daddy hate the coach because of these things. So it contributes to that. The complaining, the condemning, and the selfishness are all things that we do see, have seen. And until we're aware of these, that we may be doing them and we start to change them, unfortunately, nothing's going to change. This unhealthy pattern, repetitive, transgenerational trauma is just going to continue. The cycle goes on and on. Why is this still happening 30 years later after I was involved in sport?
Mm-hmm.
Because of exactly what you're talking about, Sean, because we haven't learned how to do it different. And until we do, this cycle is just going to continue, which makes it very scary for a lot of parents out there that might, they're leveraging the family home to put their kids in sports to pay for the things because they're so damn expensive. They're going to think twice, which means these kids don't have the opportunity to really develop and benefit from what sport can do for us.
It's so incredibly powerful, and in a positive way is what sport does, and how it simulates the tribes in which we've participated in, and has been the key to our survival and evolution as a human race, is that being a part of tribes and pushing together and being interdependent on one another. It's what simulates some of the most healthy parts of human development. And so we want kids in sport. We want kids to be physically active. We don't want, my fear is right now we're raising the hunter-gatherer group of information while sitting on their butts. And so people aren't going out and moving. They're sitting and gathering by what they can find on a screen. And I'm not certainly anti-technology, but I think everything in balance is so key. And, the one thing you said, Bob, that I think is really important is that we do know now, we do, the science and the brain science is pretty bulletproof in terms of what's healthy. We understand how power dynamics work. We understand how those things can be detrimental. And so I do think, for years and years, we could maybe say, well, geez, we just don't know what the right things are to do. We can't sit on that crutch anymore, because we know in pretty bulletproof ways what are the key ingredients to healthy cultures and to successful sports experiences. And it's really time for us to all do the right thing and continue. And what I would just say to that is that this doesn't mean that there aren't great things happening out there, because there absolutely are. I've, firsthand experiences of some amazing sport related cultures that I've sort of been a part of and heard about lots.
There's not that where every organization or every team, is experiencing. They will experience some form of it, for sure they will, because we're human beings, and it's what competition does to us, mm-hmm. right? And there's so many little aspects, and we'll touch on those in a little bit. Okay, quick question on Slido. What issues have you or your child exhibited as a result of an unsafe culture? So everything we've been describing, unsafe culture, share a little bit with us, if you don't mind. It's completely anonymous. We don't know who you are. We just need the information. We need to know what people are experiencing out there. We know what we've seen, we know what we've worked with, but we're asking you, the general public, to get more involved in this conversation. So this is very valuable to us. When we know these things, that's when we can start to do it. And pleading ignorance. Well, I didn't know, I don't know. Yeah, we live in an age of information. You can't tell me that there's not resources, there's not courses of action. Let's get more actively involved and learning about what we can do about it. Now, here's the other thing. We talked about the power differential, Sean, and unfortunately in unhealthy cultures, when what we're seeing now with parents is, because they become a little bit aware, they've read a couple of articles and they know that this is now a bad thing. The minute that's happening within that culture, they're shifting the power differential and they're becoming out of control and condemning and attacking these volunteers who have no experience, because of what's going on. So we have to keep things in the proper perspective.
Yeah.
We can have a calm, rational conversation about it. We do not need to get emotional. Everything can be fixed. And if at the end of the conversation, they've exhibited that they're not willing to make those kind of changes, now we as a family get to make a different decision, is maybe we have to remove our child from an unsafe environment because we now know the long-term effects that this can have.
Yeah, one of the slogans that I would encourage people when there are, maybe challenging situations, difference of opinions, is we often hear about the car as a vehicle, and often in unhelpful ways of, the videos of the parent losing their mind on the child. But when I think of car, is I think of calm, assertive, and respectful dialogue. And so for me, the car experience in sports, parents, coaches, athletes, if we can all get into a habit of speaking calmly, assertively, and respectfully to one another, I think it's really amazing what we can. And I think what everyone can agree upon is that, having the most successful performance. Well, to do that means conflict is inevitable. That's not something to avoid. It's just, if we can resolve them in calm, assertive, respectful ways, you just get so much more, positive results out of that kind of practice.
There's a great book, and we love to use it when we're trying to help people understand the dysfunctions within a team, right? There's a great book. Leone, I think, is the last name of the gentleman who wrote the book. It's a fantastic book, and I apologize for not knowing who he is. But if you Google book on 5 dysfunctions of a team, that'll come up. And it's all these things. And when you think about it, if we don't have trust within a culture, forget about it. If we're not willing to debate openly, honestly, respectfully, to find a resolution for what the issue is, because we're afraid of being judged, condemned, our kids being punished because we stand up and say something. Again, a major contributor to a dysfunction. That means that we're not going to commit to the fundraising, getting together, really keeping the conversations going in a positive way, working together as a unit. Now, nobody wants to be responsible. Well, it wasn't my job. It wasn't his job, wasn't their job, wasn't her job. Nobody knows whose job it was, because everybody's going like this. And fortunately, in the end, honestly, nobody gives a shit. That's the inattention to results, is who cares? I just can't wait for this to be over. And Sean, unfortunately, since we've been doing the work, you've been introduced to these sports groups where we're having those conversations in November when the season's not over till February, that I can't wait for it to be over. And they still got 3 months to go. Not a good place to be.
Yeah, and I think what's so concerning about that is we often say, sports is what prepares us for life. And if we just leave it at that, it's like, absolutely. And so if we participate in dysfunctional teams like that pyramid, then it's much more likely that that's what we're going to bring into our university experience when we're doing a team project, when we get our first job out of school, when we start to have our own families, then which to me is the most critical team within a system. And so sadly, those sorts of dysfunctions are very transferable into all domains in our life. And on the flip side, there can be incredibly great learning and healthy developmental skills that if you're a part of a winning or a positive culture, that transfers into how you develop your own family and your own workplace and your own school experience as well. So it really can be very transferable. Sadly, though, it can be transferable in a highly negative way or in a highly, what I would hope for, a more positive and rewarding way.
Well, that's the important part that we have to understand. We all get to contribute. If the culture is not going in the direction that we want, do I need to develop skills so that I can figure things out in this culture rather than just run away and hide, or rather than just, bitch and complain and throw people under the bus? That's not going to solve the problem either. And we find that when young athletes, when families, parents, coaches, administrators are, learning this information of what they can do better, it is creating those healthy cultures. It is developing their skill sets. It's making them more excited, motivated, inspiring, because they're creating this kind of environment. Everybody wants to be a part of it because it's something special. Do they win a lot? They win occasionally, but everybody raves about the experience they have because that's what's being created. That's the mandate. And it talks about on the screen here, healthy sports cultures contribute to that healthy brain development. Right? The things that these kids need to know of ultimately who they're going to become, Sean, all of these things can possibly happen, but it takes work, it takes effort, it takes learning, it takes patience by everybody that's involved, not just one individual.
Yeah, and probably the a course of a season, basketball season, a volleyball season, a hockey season. I think what's so important and what we often lose sight of is when a challenge emerges, we tend to react to that challenge instead of respond to it. And so when you're reacting to something, you're often reacting with the more fear-based aspect of your brain. And so it's that kind of threat activation, fight, flight, freeze, flock can be that sort of more low-level brain response. And when we're responding, well, we're actually taking time. We're making sure our emotions are regulated. And then we can use the smart part of our brain, our cortex, to respond to situations. I think that's one of the challenges with media and information, is that it now comes at such an overwhelming, inputs, that it's hard to take time to respond, and people find themselves very quickly on a defensive sort of reactionary. And what you're basically doing is you're using the survival part of your brain. You're not using the high performing part of your brain when we do that.
Okay, next question. Thank you so much for participating. This is great, very helpful. Have you ever contributed to a healthy culture? And I think about my experience, as an athlete, as a coach, absolutely contributed in a bunch of different ways when I was in a good spot, when I wasn't afraid of addressing the elephant in the room, when I was willing to have the tough conversation in a very respectful way so that I didn't lose the trust of the parents or my teammates or the kids that I was coaching. It takes a lot of work from each individual to make sure that they have the awareness of how they're going to contribute in a positive way. It's easy to complain. It's easy to be unhappy and miserable and put it all on somebody else's shoulders, instead of really asking the question, okay, what can I do? Who do I need to talk to make sure that my kid is safe? Maybe it's my kid. And really being able to help them understand, listen, the coach loves to yell. It doesn't mean that he doesn't like you, right? It's just his way of verbalizing. That's just who he is. He's intense. He loves it. Let's not take it personally. Okay. So will you practice that? Just remember, it's like your uncle, right? Every time we go and see uncle, he's always yelling and screaming. It's the same thing. He's just a passionate individual. Let's not get upset because he's not being mean to you. He's not calling you a bunch of names or making you feel bad. He's just an intense individual. So let's practice that skill. Those are all things that are going to contribute to a healthy culture, Sean, rather than just getting into that. Well, why are you yelling at my kid all the time? When the coaches aren't yelling at their kid, they're into it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it does. It does create opportunities to recognize that there's diverse groups of people that we're going to encounter throughout our experience. I think you're right. There are ways that I think determine safety and unsafe situations, and I think we generally have a good knowledge and understanding of that. As a parent, if there was one strategy I was going to put out there, it would be that there are 4 questions that I think we should always ask ourselves when we're dealing with a high stress or a high leverage situation, maybe with a coach. Question 1 is, how am I feeling right now? And so if I'm feeling angry, hostile, even frustrated, irritated, I probably need to do something about that. That sort of 24-hour rule before we send the email is often the thing we do when we don't check in with how we're feeling.
Yeah.
The second question is, what does my child feel, need, or want, right? And what do they need me to do? What do they want to do? What are they feeling? And make sure they start to develop some critical thinking skills around that, because that's going to pay it forward for all the challenges that comes along in life. How is the environment affecting the situation? Are there lots of people around right now? Are we at an after, a tournament party where there's alcohol involved? Is it going to be a big shame fest if we engage in some sort of a discussion point? Is there a better place, a better venue for this? Am I in the car and I'm really angry and I better hold off to talk about this at breakfast? And then how do I best respond, right? And so I think when we do that assessment, we're much more likely to respond with a solution-focused approach versus do something that I think just tends to pour gas on an already burning fire.
Very good. I asked Sadie to put your CAR acronym in the chat. So can you just repeat what CAR stands for?
You bet. And so one of the most effective vehicles of good sports culture is if I'm a parent, I'm a coach, or I'm an athlete, I want to speak calmly, assertively, and respectfully when I'm trying to solve a problem or express my feelings, needs, and wants.
Very good. We all want to have success. And I've sat in so many different boardrooms with administrators of organizations, and they ask the question, how do we define if we run a successful program or not? And when you look in the dictionary, it's really interesting. The only definition of success that you're going to find, there's one thing. It's the accomplishment of one's goals. That's the definition of success in the dictionary. Now, everybody's going to have a different interpretation of what success is, but if you clearly want a definition of what success is, it's the accomplishment of one's goals. So when we think about that from an organizational standpoint or a cultural standpoint, could it be the achievement of our goals as a group? Yes, absolutely. Right. As athletes, we want to win. Okay, well, we can't control that outcome. So what do we need to do to give ourselves the best chance at that? No different than the parents and the coaches getting involved. Is we don't control a lot of the outcomes that we want to have in sports, but we absolutely can control the process that we know is going to put us at that door to knock open the opportunity.
Yeah, Bob, I've always really appreciated that as you and I have worked together, and as I've, through working with you, ended up working with some athletes in kind of therapy, is that idea. They are really, really confused by that. Is anytime you talk to an athlete about their goals, overwhelmingly their goals are the outcomes. I want to make the quadrant team. I want to make the varsity team. I want to get a scholarship. So it's the outcomes that they actually don't have control over. And instead, what they don't spend time developing is, my goals are, I want to run this many times this week. I want to eat this many fruits and vegetables. I want to, reduce this much video game play. Like those are those SMART goals, specific, measurable, achievable, responsive, time sensitive. Like, I think if the athletes and the parents can focus more on goals versus outcomes, it gives you the chance, like you say, to knock on that door. I think people tend to focus more on, I want to make the team, versus what are the actionable steps that I need to make to give myself that best chance.
Yeah. It's important, right? It says it right there. We do not control the end result. We only control the actions that we take towards our goals. And so if the goal is to create a healthy culture, there's so many things that we can be doing on a daily basis to ensure that. How do we gauge that? Does my son or daughter love going to her sport? Am I enjoying the parents? Do we have a great relationship with the coach? Is everybody creating these memories and excited about the potential of where we're headed with this? Those are all key indicators that you're doing the right things. But it is because of those things, rather than just saying, wow, well, it wasn't very good. What did you do about it? I complained a lot. You know what I mean? I judged a lot. No, let's get to the other side where we're really focusing on how we're going to achieve creating the environment that we know is good for our kids, because that's the most important part. Sean, you talked about this, the cycle of intergenerational trauma. I think it's important for people, and we've learned this a lot in our work. Not a lot of people know that there's all these different forms of trauma. They just know the word trauma or PTSD. But there's little things that can be happening in different situations that absolutely will cause some sort of trauma for different individuals involved.
Right. And I mean, I think the words that you have listed on the left are probably worth, explaining a little bit more. And so, when we're talking about an isolated trauma, that would be some sort of very unfortunate, significant event that's happened once, right? So some sort of a vehicle accident, loss of a loved one, some sort of sudden event. And outside of that, overall things were going okay. Developmental trauma are the athletes and or people that have had repetitive experiences with aspects of abuse, neglect, maltreatment ongoing. And so that's a different type of trauma. And then secondary is the impact that trauma can have by people that have seen it happen, and they are a first responder. They are, a parent of a child that's going through something really. So I think it's important when we start to talk about trauma that we figure out a little bit, maybe a little more specificity in terms of, well, what type of trauma, and because the interventions to help people recover from those three types of trauma are different. But the good news is there are interventions to help people recover from all of those different forms of traumatic experience.
And it's a whole thing that we put together, right? Being in trauma informed in sport is something that every organization should be providing, because you see a kid get knocked out, you see them break their arm, you see a fight in the stands with parents. Those are all things that can be setting people off.
Yeah.
And so it's important that you understand, as an organization, there's lots of things that we can do, because the more educated we are, the better we're equipped to make decisions that are going to affect whether we're contributing and creating that healthy culture or not. So, trauma is a big part of it. You talk about developmental, Sean, year. You got 6 years at a critical age of my brain development, living in that kind of environment. That absolutely had an effect on who I became and how I looked at people, especially within sport. And, it affected a lot of relationships that I had because of that developmental year after year after year. It was that unhealthy culture.
Right. And it really starts to then shape how we view the world. Right. And so the lack of trust and the need to find ways to self-medicate to deal with the pain. So the longer we're in some sort of, adverse experience, the harder it can be for us to move beyond that. And so we certainly want to be mindful of, what can we do when traumatic things are happening to sort of stop that and help us recover from that. And, the interesting thing is often the most formative years of our brain development tend to be the time where we're exposing our children to sports, right? And so we better darn well make sure we're exposing kids as their brains are in the most formative developmental aspects, that we're exposing them to cultures that are healthy and do the things that sport does better than probably anything else. Relationship development, physical performance, the ability to learn how to manage disappointment, healthy competition. Those are tangible developmental skills that I can't think of anything that's better than sport to do that, if done in the context of a healthy sports culture.
So what do athletes need in a coach? This is what we've gathered over all the years, 15 years plus, of what they want in a coach, right? So they want them to be patient. They need them to be patient. They really want them to be respectful, right? It's okay if you get angry, but do it in a way where you're not singling me out in front of everybody, where I feel disrespected. And then we start that vicious cycle because the coach has been disrespectful to me. Well, guess what? I'm going to be back to you. So now we're both contributing to the unhealthy culture. We want them to be honest. And this is hard for a lot of coaches because they don't want to hurt a kid's feelings. Is they're not going to be honest. They're going to make up some bullshit excuse as to why the kid's not playing, instead of saying, listen, you're not fast enough, or you're not strong enough, or we need to work on your shot. Let's put a few more things in. If you can do this on your own time, let's evaluate in a month, and then we can really assess the progress that you're making. So being honest, acting with integrity. We talk about respecting the game, respecting the referees, respecting each other and the parents, and yet the adults tend to be the ones that don't do any of that when the competition or the monkey brain starts to cause a lot of problems. They want somebody that knows the game, right? I want to learn from somebody that I feel has been in the game, that understands the game. That's a huge part of it. They need to be a strong communicator, and that's just not a talker. Every coach says when they get hired, and I go through this all the time, Sean, when I'm sitting in those coach interviews, and I'm a really good communicator. I said, what's the definition of communication? And they're dumbfounded. They have no idea. right? And it really is that interaction between one organism as another that can change their behavior. And when we're dealing with kids who don't know how I'm communicating with that young athlete can absolutely alter their behavior in one way or the other. We want to do it positively. And I think a lot of it is really being a good listener. That's a big part of being a strong communicator. That means that I'm being a positive role model. And that means that I can help them see their potential and then start to develop that plan so they're hitting it more consistently. And when a coach can provide those things, we have found that everybody within that culture is achieving success, which is the achievement of one's goals. And those are important things as adults and role models.
Yeah, one of the things that probably worries me the most right now in the world of communication, particularly when it comes to youth sports, is I've had lots of conversations with people that are like, "Oh yeah, like we've made a rule that you can't talk to the coach all year long, or that the coach, no one's able to like." So the idea that that's insane to me, right? And it's not insane to me in the sense that I understand why. It's because people haven't controlled themselves and have behaved in really
That we have to
egregious
have a
ways.
rule like that.
But we have to, so then we're going to develop a rule that says we're not actually going to communicate with each other
Right.
at all.
Yep.
Which to me is this pendulum switch into the complete other direction. And what happens is then that's where things go underground. Things, passive aggressive behavior starts to develop. We start to have, this kind of cone of silence where, and so I really do think it's not about aggressive communications and it's not about passive. It's really about how do we get to a place? And yeah, there's time, the timing of that, the sequencing, making sure our emotions are in check. All of Sheldon Kennedy's good work through Respect in Sport, I think, is very, very on point with all that. But the idea of we've made a team rule that means we don't actually communicate. The adults aren't going to communicate with each other all year is really kind of insane to me.
Yeah, backwards and antiquated and ancient and ineffective.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so let's dive into what athletes need from parents. This is what they've told us, right? Definitely need them to be patient. Most importantly, to listen. A lot of kids don't talk because they don't feel that their parents listen to them. Not trying to fix things, not trying to judge things, but just listening to what they're trying to elaborate, share their experience, but we got to fix it or we got to judge it. Practicing just being there and listening is one of the things that the kids really want to see more of. Again, integrity, respect, accountability for their actions in the stands and how they are, whether it's in the car ride to or from or in the stands, right? They want them to be just as accountable for their behavior. And most importantly, really, Sean, is that emotional support, right? And when we can share our experiences, when we can be vulnerable, saying, hey, I went through the same thing when I was this age and it caused me to do this, rather than judge, criticize, condemn, and complain, it allows them to put things in the proper context. So now what mom and dad said, I can use versus, oh, here we go again, where, there's 3 feet of snow on the ground and they're walking barefoot and I'm just whining about stuff. Right? That doesn't work anymore. These things, when the parents give them to the athletes, it's amazing how much more productive those athletes can be.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that can really help with, parents being accountable and that emotional support is, I would take a little interview you shared with me from Rory McIlroy, where he said one of the things that he really needed to do to get back on track with his golf game was this idea that when I play golf, that has no concept on who I am as a person, and had to separate being a golf player and how that, and I think as parents and being a parent that has had kids in sports and continues to have kids in sports, I think we can all slide into that rabbit hole of somehow if my kid's not being successful, they're not on the best team, that somehow means I'm a failure as a parent. And I think when we get into those thinking traps, that is where we can lose patience. It is where we can start to lose sight of what this is about, which is actually creating experience for the athletes, and that it doesn't have any definition. Because sadly, I did not give good genetic loading to my kids on being a star athlete of any sort. When I've been able to let go of their success isn't a reflection of who I am as a person, I think it's been a bit more freeing, and I can try to be a bit more accountable in how I show up, in cheering them on.
There's some really important parts there. I'm going to switch it back real quick to creating that healthy group perspective, right? That healthy culture. Focus on wellness, right? We're going to take care of each other. We're going to be respectful. We're going to be mindful of the emotions that other people are feeling and very respectful. We're going to improve our skill level. We're all going to get better at different skills, not just physical skills. Some of them could be social skills. Some of them could be mental skills. We're going to work together for that success, right? We've set some goals as a group. How do we determine we're going to do these things? We're going to learn how to compete. We're going to, increase and enhance our self-worth and self-esteem and ultimately enjoy that success. It's not that hard, right? Everybody understands this. What we found is a lot of people don't know how to do this. And so we want to get into some of that, right? One of the first and most important things, Sean, is accountability. We see this within sports. Since you've been involved with I Got Mine, we've seen a ton of instances where there is that resistance to being accountable. It's one of the biggest problems that we see with the young athletes and young people of today is that they don't understand this accountability. So they're not going to be, and we allow them not to be. And that's a major contributor to the start or making it worse of an unhealthy culture is the lack of accountability.
Yeah, and I think one of our dear friends and colleagues, Tanya O'Neill, will often refer to maybe one of the things getting in the way of this is this generation of we've become concierge parents, right? So that idea of how do I make your stay more comfortable? And so then we send our children into highly competitive environments where they believe it's somehow everyone else's responsibility to make their stay more comfortable. And so maybe by removing some of the challenges and the barriers, it doesn't really set those athletes up for a whole pile of success when it comes to that accountability.
And so when we talk about, creating accountability, it starts with me as a parent, right? Am I managing my emotions well? Because if I'm not, I'm giving my kid permission to not do it too. Right? Am I being respectful in how I'm communicating with the coaches or the fact that I'm not happy with something? Am I pointing out all the good things that everybody else is doing? Am I that positive influence within the culture? And so I've got to be accountable as the adult. I've got to be accountable if you're a coach and athletes out there, anybody that's listening, if you're a parent and your kid's not with you tonight, this is important. They have to be accountable for all of their behavior. And they're smart little buggers today. I'm telling you, they know how to play you. They know how to tell you what they want to hear. They've learned how to survive in the 21st century. And us as parents, overcompensating because we don't want them to experience what we did causes a lot of issues. That lack of accountability with athletes is a major contributor to some of the issues that we're seeing with the mental health and wellness of the parents and the athletes and the coaches.
Some of the stories that we hear about that I think make us all shudder, I really think goes back to that. And I think that's probably one of the most critical changes we need to make is that when someone has talent, it's okay for us to acknowledge that talent. What it's not okay for us to do is to stop holding them accountable in other aspects of their life by being a good person. And I think sadly what we see play out is my athlete is special, so they don't have to treat their brothers and sisters with respect. They don't have to necessarily follow the rules at home. I'll help them with their schoolwork because they're special. And I think when we promote that sort of thinking, we then start to create this idea that the rules of society don't apply. Yep. And I really think that's the core issue here. And that's the core issue that maybe needs to get explored a little bit more is I think just because someone has talent doesn't mean that they don't have to follow the societal rules that I think have been developed for the healthy, safe, and wellness of all of us participating on the planet.
Setting consequences is really important. Being able to, that's what creates the accountability is we have consequences in place for certain behavior. Really being able to do that is so important. A big part of getting to that great success. I'm going to put this out on our social media. It's a great video with Ray Ferraro talking about creating a winning environment. And when we have different rules for different people, right, there should be one set of rules for everybody. And unhealthy cultures, because someone's talented, because someone is perceived to be a player that's going to help us win championships, they can play by a different set of rules. And that is so unhealthy. And contributes to a lot of the different issues that are going on. I love this quote by Bobby Orr, developing better people should be the number one goal for any coach. because when we do that, we're going to develop more and better pros and contributing members to society. I love to add that "and" part of, because there's more doctors, there's more lawyers, there's more teachers, there's more fathers, there's more husbands that come out of hockey than there are actually professional hockey players. And we need to keep that in the proper context. You know, some of them will. They're always going to be the ones that determine how far they go, because they're the ones that have to do the work. I've gotten arguments with parents saying, I'm going to write a check for my kid to get all the way to the top. And it's not a year later when they're 14 going, I don't know why they quit.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So you can write all the checks that you want, but if the kid loses his motivation, you're going to be really disappointed. So it's important to understand that. Sean, I want to touch on, and I know we're getting to the end here, we don't have much left, but the values and how important values are, as I want to guide everybody through one thing that they can do here.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is really what sets the course for culture, is that idea that we start to really identify what our values and beliefs are individually and as a team. And then you can really set up the structure of what are we then going to do to drive that, right? And I think often we maybe jump into action phase without a really good understanding of what are the values and beliefs and the guiding principles that we want to get us there in the first place.
This is an exercise that I've done for years. You get everybody in a room once you have your team, or once the culture is, and it's real simple. It's a real valuable process. Everybody gets little 3x5 index cards. Make sure you're mixing up. Don't let the parents sit with their children. Try and mix it up so everybody's different, and ask them the question, what 3 things would you like to remember about this year? So imagine you're at the end of the year and you're looking back of all the things you did. What are the 3 things that you would like to remember? It's really neat what you start to get out from it. And then when they do that in their small groups, then you get them to share collectively as a group, and you're going to stand at the whiteboard and you're going to write down these different things, knowing that it's kind of a setup, right? What we want to do is, on that board, is you're going to write down one list. Don't write outcomes on there, but write the things are outcomes. And then in another, write down what the values are. And when you get to the end, what's the difference? Now you can write the outcomes and the values. And if we focus on our values of having fun and working together and keeping that trust strong between everybody, we want to create positive memories. We're going to act with integrity and accountability. If that's our focus, odds are we're going to be winning championships. We're going to be the best in the team, because everybody's going to be able to be their best, because it's a healthy, productive culture. It's a simple exercise to do. From that, what you can do is take that mission statement, make them for everybody, get one of the parents to type it up, get them to put it on their refrigerator, get magnets made. That's the banner that you bring to the rink. Whatever you got to do to remind each other of, this is what our focus is here, to create a trusting environment that promotes fun, teamwork, accountability, and integrity. If that's your mission, that's the environment that you're striving towards, Sean, nothing but good things is going to happen for all those individuals.
Well, that's the thing, is even if you really do winning at all costs is deep down in your heart of hearts what you really want to experience, I don't really know how you get there without doing the emotional and mental wellness approach to things. I just think, maybe the odd time we get lucky, but then sadly, there's a lot of people lying in wake that have had to win at all costs without the mental and emotional support that's required to perform at the highest level, whatever that level is.
Yeah. We don't need it to be that heavy of a toll. Okay, so some key takeaways as we wrap up here. Healthy perspective leads to positive values, right? The values can be the driver. Stick to your values you decide on as a group, and hold each other accountable to live and exhibit those values. Really important one here, Sean, reinforce the good behavior. We tend to, especially in sports, focus on what wasn't done instead of what is being done. And so if there is good behavior going on, if it's with a parent group, right, and they're very respectful and they're very supportive, coaches, make an effort to go and thank all the parents, administrators, go and, you know what, you guys are great. I feel so good about this. Parents with your athletes, coaches with your athletes, athlete to athlete, reinforcing good behavior is only going to make people feel good. So make sure that you're really focusing on that, and then be prepared to work at building and sustaining the culture you want. Listen, this is not a one-time thing. This is not easy. It takes a full-blown commitment, Sean, from everybody involved, because the minute one person forgets and is not accountable, we've opened the door for that unhealthy culture to start showing its ugly face.
Yeah, and then I think, you know, what Sheldon has really talked about is that when that does happen, we really as bystanders need to dig in and step up and do the right thing for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
It's been a great hour with you. You know what? I want to talk about a couple of organizations that have really recognized the importance of this. So we're working with Southern Alberta Hockey Academy out of Medicine Hat. We're going to be working with the coaching staff, the parents, and the athletes, both male and female sides. I got to give a shout out to these organizations that are being proactive. The Bow Valley Timberwolves, the U18, the U15, and the U13 athletes. We're going to be doing some work with the coaches and the parents as well. Again, very forward thinking. And we're very happy to announce that we've struck a partnership with the International Hockey Academy that really wants to focus on what we teach and creating a culture, memorable experiences, and most importantly, opportunities for everybody. What's next? Thank you so much for being here, Sean. Anything that you want to contribute or add to as we wrap up here?
Just really hopeful that we can continue to all take a role in making sport the amazing, successful, enjoyable experience it all. You know, enjoy your parent parties, have fun, but don't have too much fun. You know, remind yourselves that those early morning trips to the court or the rink or the field, it really does, steal from a country song, that idea that, you know, days go slow, but years go fast. And it really does go by in the blink of an eye. So just hope people, you know, cherish these opportunities. It looks like all full speed ahead that we can get back to living in a world where we're not distanced and that we can, you know, I should knock on wood, I guess, when I say that.
You had to say it.
Yeah, but I really do hope people get back to just doing all the wonderful things that sport can do for all of us that are involved.
Thank you, Sean, for being here. As always, great insights. Really appreciate it. Listen, if you want help, if you want to participate, if you think your organization should be doing these things, but you don't know how to do it, that's what we're here to do. This is what we've been doing for 15 years. This is my life's purpose. When I made the decision in 2008 that this is what I was going to do, I had to leave coaching. I love to coach, but I knew that I could help so many more if I left doing that. And that's what we've been doing for 15 years. Thousands of individuals, families, organizations. So if you need help and you're not quite sure what to do, go to igotmine.ca. You can book a free consultation there, and we can show you how we can help you, your athletes, your administrators, your coaches, and your parents create that culture of success. My name's Bob Wilkie. I can't tell you how much I appreciate your input with Slido. We're going to take that. Watch for upcoming events. Good luck in your transition into school and back into the routine and the grind. I hope you get a good couple of weeks left of summer where you can relax and enjoy everybody. Take care of yourselves. And if you need anything, you know where we're at. Thanks for coming, and we hope you enjoy.